On a bitter winter night, when the temperature plummeted to dangerous levels, former Army Ranger Marcus Brenner discovered a half-frozen German shepherd pawing desperately at his door. Instead of growling or showing aggression, the magnificent animal's eyes held an unmistakable intelligence and urgency, as if it were trying to communicate something far more important than its need for shelter. When Marcus finally opened his door to this unexpected visitor, he couldn't have anticipated how this encounter would not only heal wounds from his past, but lead him to a discovery that would save more than one life that night. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Brenner was intimately familiar with winter's cruelty. After 15 years serving in some of the world's most hostile environments, followed by 3 years of solitude in his grandfather's renovated cabin on the outskirts of Pine Ridge, Montana, cold had become just another adversary to endure. At 41, the former Army Ranger carried his military precision into civilian life, splitting firewood with methodical efficiency, maintaining his modest home with rigorous attention to detail, and adhering to routines that provided structure in a world that had come to feel increasingly alien. Tonight's forecast had warned of record-breaking cold, with temperatures expected to reach 30 below zero. Marcus had spent the morning reinforcing insulation around his pipes and stocking extra firewood in the covered alcove beside his front door. By mid-afternoon, he had completed his preparations and settled into the familiar rhythm of a winter evening. A simple meal, a worn paperback, and the consistent crackling of pine logs in the stone fireplace that dominated his living room. The solitude suited him. After his final tour in Afghanistan had ended with an IED explosion that left 3 of his squad members dead and his own body broken in ways both visible and invisible, Marcus had retreated from the world of people and their complications. His physical wounds had healed, the scars on his right leg and the occasionally troublesome shoulder serving as permanent reminders, but the deeper injuries to his spirit had proven more resistant to recovery. The cabin, inherited from his grandfather 2 years after his medical discharge, provided the perfect sanctuary. Nestled among towering pines with the nearest neighbor 3 miles down a winding dirt road, it offered the isolation he craved. In Pine Ridge, a town of barely 800 souls, Marcus was known but not known, the quiet veteran who came in for supplies every couple of weeks, exchanged the minimum pleasantries required, and disappeared back into the woods. Few people knew that before the explosion, Marcus had been considered the most effective squad leader in his unit, a man whose intuition had saved countless lives, whose compassion had earned him the fierce loyalty of those under his command, and whose natural leadership had marked him for advancement. Even fewer knew about the nightmares that still plagued him, the faces of the men he couldn't save, visiting him in the darkest hours before dawn. Marcus glanced at his watch, 1922, the military time habit he'd never shed, and moved to the window. Outside, the world had transformed into a hostile landscape of white and shadow. Snow had been falling steadily all day, accumulating in drifts against the cabin walls and obscuring the narrow path that led to the main road. The pines surrounding his property bent under the weight of ice and snow, their branches occasionally releasing their burden with sharp cracks that punctuated the winter silence. His grandfather had chosen this location for its beauty and remoteness, but on nights like this, Marcus appreciated the old man's practical foresight. The cabin's thick log walls and reinforced roof stood firm against winter's assault, while the oversized wood stove and fireplace ensured that cold remained an outside concern. Self-sufficiency had been drilled into him from childhood, then reinforced through military training. Here, in his isolated domain, Marcus relied on no one and nothing except his own preparations and resources. The radio on his kitchen counter, crackled with static before the local station's evening weather update cut through. Expect whiteout conditions through the night, with wind chills approaching -40. County officials have issued a travel advisory effective immediately. Residents are urged to remain indoors and check on elderly neighbors if possible. Again, this is shaping up to be the worst cold snap in 15 years. Marcus turned down the volume. There would be no checking on neighbors tonight, not with visibility reduced to nearly zero and temperatures that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. The people of Pine Ridge were hardy stock, accustomed to winter's extremes and prepared for its challenges. They would weather this storm as they had countless others. He returned to his armchair, adjusting the reading lamp to cast better light on his dog-eared copy of Jack London's The Call of the Wild. The story of survival in the unforgiving Yukon wilderness seemed appropriately matched to the howling wind outside his windows. Marcus had first read it during his teenage years, but found new meaning in its pages now, understanding Buck's transformation and adaptations with the perspective of someone who had himself been forced to evolve in response to harsh realities. The first scratch at his door was so faint that Marcus initially mistook it for a branch scraping against the cabin's exterior. The second, more deliberate sound drew his attention, pulling him from the narrative and back to the present moment. Setting aside his book, he cocked his head, listening intently, a habit formed during long nights on patrol, when unusual sounds often signaled danger. There it was again, a distinct scratching followed by what sounded almost like a whimper. Marcus rose, military instincts kicking in as he approached the window adjacent to the front door. Pulling back the curtain just enough to peer into the darkness, he expected to see perhaps a raccoon or fox seeking shelter from the bitter cold. What he saw instead stopped him cold. A large German shepherd stood on his porch, its coat covered in ice and snow, one paw raised as if to scratch again at the door. The dog's body trembled violently from cold, steam rising from its muzzle with each labored breath. But it was the animal's eyes that caught and held Marcus's attention, intelligent, desperate, and filled with what he could only interpret as determination. Marcus hesitated. He hadn't owned a pet since childhood, and the responsibilities of animal ownership seemed at odds with his carefully constructed isolation. Yet something about the German shepherd's stance and those eerily communicative eyes stirred memories of the military working dogs he'd encountered during his service, animals whose courage and loyalty had often matched or exceeded those of their human counterparts. The dog scratched again, more urgently this time, then backed away slightly from the door as if providing space, an almost human gesture of courtesy that further unsettled Marcus. This wasn't normal animal behavior, especially not for a creature desperately seeking warmth. Against his better judgment, Marcus moved to the door and turned the deadbolt. The sound caused the shepherd's ears to perk forward, its attention focusing intently on the door handle. Slowly, cautiously, Marcus opened the door a few inches, letting in a blast of frigid air along with a swirl of snowflakes. "Hey there," he said quietly, using the same calm tone he'd employed with frightened civilians in combat zones. "Where'd you come from, buddy?" The German shepherd didn't attempt to push its way inside, as Marcus had expected. Instead, it stood perfectly still, those intelligent eyes locked on his face, before turning to look back over its shoulder into the swirling snow. Then it returned its gaze to Marcus, let out a soft whine, and took a single step away from the door before looking back again. The message couldn't have been clearer if the animal had spoken aloud. "Follow me." "You want me to come out there?" Marcus asked incredulously. "It's 30 below, dog. Whatever's out there can wait until morning." The shepherd whined again, more insistently, pawing at the wooden planks of the porch. Its body still trembled from cold, but the animal made no move to enter the warmth of the cabin. Instead, it repeated the gesture, looking at Marcus, then out into the storm, then back again. Something about the dog's desperate insistence triggered Marcus's long-dormant instincts, the same intuition that had allowed him to detect ambushes before they occurred and identify threats before they materialized. This wasn't just an animal seeking shelter, this was a messenger. "Christ!" Marcus muttered, already reaching for his heavy winter coat and boots. "This better be important." As he stepped onto the porch, the bitter cold sliced through his layers like a physical blow. The German Shepherd immediately moved forward, limping slightly on what appeared to be an injured rear leg, but moving with clear purpose toward the tree line that bordered the eastern edge of Marcus's property. Pulling his scarf over his nose and mouth, Marcus followed, already questioning his sanity. Following a strange dog into a blizzard went against every survival principle he'd ever learned. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't random, that something significant waited beyond the curtain of snow and darkness. Little did he know that his decision to trust this frozen messenger would lead to a discovery that would shatter his carefully constructed isolation and force him to confront not just the bitter cold of a Montana winter, but the frozen aspects of his own heart that had remained numb since that devastating day in Afghanistan. The blizzard intensified with each step Marcus took behind the German Shepherd. Wind whipped snow into miniature tornadoes that stung his exposed skin, while his breath crystallized instantly in the frigid air. He dressed hastily but adequately. Thermal underwear beneath flannel-lined jeans, a heavy wool sweater, his military-grade winter coat, insulated gloves, and the waterproof boots that had served him through countless Montana winters. Even so, the cold penetrated his layers with alarming efficiency. The German Shepherd moved forward with single-minded determination, occasionally looking back, as if to ensure Marcus continued following. Despite its obvious injury and the violent trembling that racked its frame, the dog maintained a steady pace, forging a path through snow that reached past its chest in some places. "Where are you taking me?" Marcus called over the howling wind, his voice muffled by the scarf wrapped around the lower half of his face. The shepherd offered no response beyond another backward glance and a slight increase in speed. Marcus noticed that the animal was following a specific trajectory, not wandering randomly through the woods. There was purpose in its movement, a clear destination in mind. 20 yards into the tree line, the density of pines provided some shelter from the worst of the wind. Snow still fell heavily, but the relative calm allowed Marcus to focus beyond the immediate challenge of remaining upright against the gale. He studied the dog more carefully as they moved through the forest. The German Shepherd was a magnificent animal despite its current condition. Its coat, where not matted with ice and snow, showed the classic black and tan coloration. Its build suggested it was male, likely 2 or 3 years old, still in its prime, but fully mature. Most telling was the way it moved, even injured, the disciplined gait and alert posture that Marcus recognized from military working dogs he'd encountered in Afghanistan. "You're trained," Marcus observed aloud. "Military or police?" The dog's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, but it remained focused on its unseen objective. They had traveled perhaps a quarter-mile from the cabin, moving deeper into the forest that bordered Marcus's property. The terrain sloped gradually downward, toward what Marcus knew was a ravine, cut by a creek that ran swiftly in spring, but remained frozen solid through winter months. Under normal circumstances, the trek would have been manageable, even straightforward. But tonight, with snow accumulating rapidly and temperatures plummeting further, every step required deliberate effort. Marcus's tactical awareness, honed through years of navigating hostile territories, registered their position in relation to his cabin, cataloging landmarks even as they disappeared beneath winter's blanket. The German shepherd paused suddenly, head raised, nose working the frigid air. A low whine escaped its throat, not the sound of pain but of recognition. The dog turned to Marcus, eyes reflecting the dim moonlight that occasionally penetrated. The cloud cover then darted forward with renewed urgency. Marcus increased his pace to match, fighting through a drift that reached mid-thigh. As he crested a small rise, the terrain dropped away toward the ravine he'd anticipated. The creek below lay silent under a thick layer of ice, its summer voice stilled by winter's grip. And there, at the bottom of the slope, Marcus saw what had driven the shepherd through the blizzard to find help. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. A vehicle, what appeared to be an SUV, lay partially overturned near the creek bed, its front end crumpled against a large boulder. No lights shone from within, but even from this distance, Marcus could make out a faint trail of exhaust, indicating the engine still ran. "Shit," Marcus muttered, instantly shifting from reluctant follower to trained responder. He navigated the slope with careful speed, using tree trunks to stabilize his descent. The German shepherd had already reached the vehicle and now pawed frantically at the driver's side door, which faced upward due to the car's tilted position. As Marcus approached, he noted the details with military precision. A dark blue Subaru Forester with Montana plates, approximately 2 to 3 hours off the road, based on the snow accumulation around its frame. The vehicle had clearly skidded off the unmarked Forest Service road that ran along the ridge above, rolling once before coming to rest in its current position. The German shepherd barked sharply as Marcus reached the car, the first vocal sound the dog had made beyond whimpers. The bark held the same urgency as the scratching at Marcus's door had earlier. Marcus brushed snow from the driver's window and peered inside. A woman slumped against the steering wheel, unmoving. In the back seat, secured in a child safety seat, a young girl of perhaps 4 or 5 years stared back at him with wide, frightened eyes. Adrenaline surged through Marcus's system, pushing away the cold and fatigue. He tried the door handle, locked. Making a split-second decision, he removed his glove, formed a fist with his hand, and struck the window with his elbow at its weakest point near the edge. The safety glass spider-webbed but held. A second, harder strike shattered it inward. Reaching carefully through the broken window, Marcus unlocked the door and pulled it open against the resistance of accumulated snow. The German shepherd immediately attempted to leap into the vehicle, but Marcus blocked its path with his arm. "Easy, boy," he commanded. "Let me check first." The dog backed off with obvious reluctance, watching intently as Marcus assessed the driver. The woman appeared to be in her early 30s, with blood matting her blonde hair where her head had struck the side window. Her breathing was shallow but present, her pulse weak but regular when he pressed fingers against her neck. "Ma'am?" Marcus called, gently shaking her shoulder. "Can you hear me?" No response. Hypothermia had likely set in, compounding whatever injuries she'd sustained in the crash. The car's heater still functioned, but weakly. The temperature inside was dangerously low for an injured person and a small child. Marcus turned his attention to the girl in the back seat. Unlike her mother, she was alert, though her lips showed the bluish tinge of developing hypothermia. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, adopting the gentle tone he'd once used with frightened children in war-torn villages. "My name is Marcus. I'm here to help you and your mom. What's your name?" The child stared at him silently, clutching a well-worn stuffed rabbit to her chest. "That's a nice rabbit," Marcus tried again. "Does he have a name?" "Hoppy," came the whispered response, so faint he almost missed it above the wind. "Hoppy's a good name," Marcus nodded. "And what's your name?" "Emma." The girl's voice grew marginally stronger. "Are you a soldier?" Marcus blinked in surprise at the question. "I used to be. How did you know that?" You look like the soldiers in Mommy's pictures, Emma replied, her gaze shifting to the German shepherd that now stood on its hind legs, front paws on the car's frame as it tried to see inside. That's Ranger. He went to get help. The pieces clicked into place for Marcus, the dog's training, its determined effort to bring him here. Is Ranger your dog, Emma? The little girl nodded. He's Mommy's helper. She was in the army too. Marcus processed this information quickly as he assessed their situation. An army veteran, possibly with a service dog, driving on an isolated forest road during a winter storm. The woman had made critical errors in judgment, but that didn't matter now. What mattered was getting both mother and daughter to safety before the cold claimed them. Emma, I need to get you and your mum somewhere warm. My cabin isn't far from here. Do you think you can be a brave soldier and help me? The girl nodded solemnly, her small face setting with determination that seemed beyond her years. Marcus turned back to the unconscious woman, making quick calculations. He couldn't carry both mother and child through the deep snow back to his cabin. He needed to stabilize the woman here while he took Emma to safety, then return with his emergency sled. Working methodically, Marcus turned off the car's engine to eliminate any risk of carbon monoxide buildup, then reclined the driver's seat to lay the woman flat. He removed his outer coat and tucked it around her, sacrificing his own comfort for her survival. From the glove compartment, he retrieved the vehicle registration, Catherine Sullivan, with an address in Bozeman, nearly 200 miles away. Your mom's name is Catherine, Marcus asked Emma as he unbuckled her from the child seat. Everyone calls her Kate, Emma replied, except when she's in trouble. Then Grandma calls her Catherine Ann. Despite the gravity of the situation, Marcus felt a slight smile tug at his lips. Well, we're going to help Kate. I'm going to carry you to my cabin first, where it's warm. Then I'll come back for your mom. Ranger can stay with her while we're gone. As if understanding every word, the German shepherd jumped into the front seat the moment Marcus lifted Emma out, positioning himself protectively next to Kate's unconscious form. The dog's loyalty stirred something in Marcus's chest, a recognition of the unbreakable bond that formed between soldiers and those who watched over them. Marcus wrapped Emma securely in the emergency blanket he'd found in the back of the Forester, then zipped her inside his insulated vest against his chest, leaving only her face exposed. The arrangement was awkward, but would preserve her body. Heat during the trek back to the cabin. Ranger, stay, Marcus commanded, using the firm tone that military working dogs responded to. The shepherd settled more firmly against Kate, eyes alert and watchful. We'll be back soon. With Emma secured against him, Marcus began the arduous journey back through the blizzard. The return trip proved more difficult. Breaking trail through fresh snow while carrying a child taxed his endurance in ways that reminded him of the most grueling training exercises from his ranger days. The old injury in his leg protested with each step, but he pushed the pain aside with practiced discipline. Emma remained silent against his chest, her small body occasionally shivering despite the layers protecting her. Marcus talked to her as they traveled, partly to keep her alert, partly to distract himself from the burning in his muscles and lungs. You're doing great, Emma, he encouraged as they finally reached the edge of the tree line, his cabin visible through the curtain of falling snow. Almost there. Your mom named Ranger well. Did you know that? Rangers lead the way. That's what we used to say in the army. Rangers lead the way. The cabin's warm interior felt like a miracle after the brutal cold outside. Marcus gently set Emma down on the sofa nearest the fireplace, quickly adding logs to build up the heat. The little girl watched him with solemn eyes as he efficiently gathered supplies. His emergency medical kit, the collapsible rescue sled, he kept for winter emergencies, additional blankets, and a thermos of hot broth. I need to go back for your mom now, Marcus explained as he wrapped Emma in warm blankets. Will you be okay here for a little while? It's very important that you stay on this sofa under these blankets. Emma clutched Hoppy tighter. Ranger will take care of Mommy until you get there. The child's simple faith in her dog's protective abilities resonated with Marcus in unexpected ways. How long had it been since he'd allowed himself to trust so completely in anything or anyone? Yes, he will, Marcus agreed. Ranger is a very brave dog. As he prepared to venture back into the storm, Marcus realized that something had shifted inside him. The familiar numbness that had been his constant companion for years had receded, replaced by a clarity of purpose he hadn't experienced since before the explosion that ended his military career. Someone needed him, not just anyone, but a fellow veteran and her child. And somehow a remarkable German shepherd had known exactly where to find the help they required. Marcus checked his watch, 20:47. Less than 90 minutes had passed since the dog had first appeared at his door, yet everything had changed. The isolation he had so carefully constructed around himself had been breached by a freezing German shepherd with desperate eyes and a mission to complete. And now Marcus had a mission too. Marcus zipped his secondary winter coat to his chin and pulled the hood tight around his face, preparing to venture back into the blizzard. The brief respite in the cabin's warmth had only highlighted the danger Kate Sullivan faced with each passing minute. Hypothermia was an insidious killer. It didn't announce itself with dramatic symptoms, but rather shut the body down gradually, making rescue increasingly difficult as time progressed. Emma, I need you to be very brave, Marcus said, kneeling before the little girl who sat bundled in blankets on his sofa. I'm going to lock the door when I leave. Don't open it for anyone but me, understand? Stay by the fire and don't touch anything else. Emma nodded, her eyes wide but surprisingly calm for a child her age. Are you going to bring Mommy and Ranger back? That's exactly what I'm going to do, Marcus promised. He pointed to the digital clock on the mantel. See those numbers? When they change to show 21:45, I'll be back with your mom and Ranger. The little girl studied the clock intently, her brow furrowing with concentration. That's when the first number becomes a 2, and the other numbers say 145? Marcus nodded, impressed by her comprehension. That's right. You're very smart, Emma. Mommy taught me numbers, she said simply. She says math is important if I want to be an astronaut. Despite the urgency of the situation, Marcus found himself momentarily arrested by the child's matter-of-fact statement. An astronaut, not a princess or a movie star, but an astronaut, a dream that spoke of courage, intelligence, and determination. Your mom sounds like a wise woman, he said, rising to his feet. When I bring her back, you can tell her about the stars we can see from my cabin when the storm clears. Deal? Emma nodded solemnly. Deal. Marcus glanced around the cabin one final time, ensuring everything was secure before his departure. The rescue sled he'd retrieved from his storage shed was lightweight but sturdy, designed to transport an injured person through snow. He'd loaded it with emergency medical supplies, additional blankets, chemical heat packs, and a thermos of warm broth, everything he might need to stabilize Kate before the journey back. Remember, stay put, he said as he opened the door, letting in a blast of frigid air. I'll be back soon. The blizzard had intensified during his brief absence from it. Snow fell so heavily now that visibility had dropped to less than 10 feet. The wind had shifted direction, now blowing directly into his face as he began retracing their path back toward the ravine. Had he not been meticulously observant during the journey to his cabin, he might have become disoriented in the whiteout conditions. But Marcus had spent years navigating hostile terrain under extreme conditions, and his internal compass remained true. He followed their previous tracks, now partly filled with fresh snow, pulling the emergency sled behind him. Each step required deliberate effort, the snow reaching mid-thigh in some places. The temperature had dropped further, the cold now a living presence that sought entry through every seam in his clothing. His injured leg protested with increasing vehemence, the old wound awakened by cold and exertion. Marcus set a steady pace, neither rushing nor dawdling. Rush, and he risked exhaustion before reaching Kate. Delay, and hypothermia would claim her before he arrived. Finding the balance required the same tactical mindset he'd employed during long-range reconnaissance missions. Conserve energy, maintain awareness, adapt to changing conditions. 15 minutes into the journey, a sound cut through the howling. Wind, a distant, mournful howl that raised the hair on the back of Marcus's neck. It came again, longer this time, carrying a note of distress that accelerated his heart rate. Ranger. The German shepherd's call spurred Marcus to increase his pace slightly, pushing through the pain in his leg and the burning in his lungs. The ravine couldn't be much farther now, perhaps another 10 minutes at his current pace. He'd been careful to note landmarks during their journey, a lightning-struck pine, a distinctive boulder, the place where the terrain began to slope downward. But the intensifying snowfall had obscured many of these markers. Another howl, closer now, confirming he was on the right track. Marcus called back, his voice carrying in the cold air, "Ranger! Here, boy!" Silence followed, then the sound of movement through snow. Moments later, the German shepherd materialized. From the swirling white, his coat covered in fresh powder, the dog barked once, sharply, then turned and began moving back in the direction he had come, glancing over his shoulder to ensure Marcus followed. "Lead the way," Marcus said, grateful. For the four-legged guide, Ranger moved with purpose, creating a path that Marcus could follow more easily than breaking trail himself. The dog seemed to sense the urgency of their mission, maintaining a pace that challenged Marcus without exhausting him. Despite his injury, the German shepherd displayed remarkable stamina and focus, occasionally circling back when deeper drifts slowed Marcus's progress. They reached the ravine faster than Marcus had anticipated, the SUV still visible as a dark shape against the white landscape. Ranger raced ahead, disappearing through the broken window that Marcus had created earlier. By the time Marcus navigated the slope and reached the vehicle, the German shepherd had resumed his protective position beside Kate, his body pressed against hers, as if sharing what warmth he possessed. "Good boy," Marcus said as he peered into the car. "You did good, Ranger." Kate Sullivan remained unconscious, her breathing shallow but present. Her skin had taken on the waxy pallor of significant hypothermia, and her pulse, when Marcus checked it, felt sluggish beneath his fingertips. The situation had deteriorated in the hour since he'd left, not catastrophically, but concerning enough to demand immediate action. Working methodically despite the bitter cold, Marcus secured the rescue sled near the vehicle's open door, then carefully extracted Kate from the driver's seat. Her body felt disturbingly light in his arms, her frame smaller than it had appeared. When she was slumped behind the wheel, as he laid her on the rescue sled, Ranger jumped down from the car and stood sentinel nearby, watching Marcus's every move with intense focus. "She's going to be okay," Marcus told the dog, unsure why he felt compelled to reassure the animal, "but we need to warm her core temperature gradually." He unwrapped several chemical heat packs, activating them and placing them at strategic points, armpits, groin, neck, where major blood vessels would carry the warmth throughout her body. Next came layers of emergency blankets, wrapped securely around Kate's still form. Finally, Marcus secured her to the sled with padded straps, ensuring she wouldn't shift during the difficult journey ahead. Only when these critical tasks were complete did Marcus allow himself a moment to truly look at the woman Ranger had led him to save. Kate Sullivan's features, even relaxed in unconsciousness, suggested strength and determination. A thin scar ran along her jawline, surgical, not traumatic, based on its precision. Her hands, exposed briefly as Marcus wrapped the blankets, showed calluses consistent with someone familiar with both weapons and tools. Ranger whined softly, breaking Marcus's momentary contemplation. The German shepherd limped to the edge of the ravine, looking back expectantly. The message was clear: time to move. Right, Marcus agreed, gathering the tow ropes for the rescue sled. Let's get her home. The journey back to the cabin presented challenges that tested Marcus's endurance to its limits. Pulling the sled uphill through deep snow required strength. He wasn't certain he still possessed after years of relative inactivity. His injured leg screamed in protest with each step, the old wound sending jagged bolts of pain up to his hip. Sweat formed beneath his layers despite the frigid temperature, potentially dangerous if it soaked through to his skin. Yet something had awakened in Marcus that refused to yield to pain or fatigue. Perhaps it was the military discipline that had once been the cornerstone of his identity, or perhaps it was something more fundamental, the human instinct to protect, that transcended his self-imposed isolation. Whatever its source, the determination burned hot enough to counter the cold that surrounded him. Ranger proved invaluable during their return journey. The German shepherd scouted ahead, finding the path of least resistance through snowdrifts. Occasionally, when Marcus struggled on steeper sections, the dog would grab the edge of the rescue, sled in his powerful jaws, pulling alongside as if understanding exactly what was needed. Despite his own injury and exhaustion, Ranger's focus never wavered from the mission at hand. They reached the tree line just as Marcus's strength began to falter. The cabin, illuminated by the porch light he'd left on, stood like a beacon in the storm. Safety and warmth within reach, but still requiring a final push across the open yard where snow had accumulated in drifts nearly waist-high. Almost there, Marcus gasped, his breath forming dense clouds in the frigid air. "Come on, Ranger, almost home." The word home slipped out unbidden, carrying connotations Marcus hadn't intended. The cabin had been shelter, refuge, isolation, but not truly home. Home implied connections, belonging, purpose beyond mere survival. Yet in this moment, with a fellow veteran unconscious on his rescue sled and her daughter waiting inside, the word felt strangely appropriate. The final 100 yards tested Marcus's resolve to its breaking point. Each step became a deliberate act of will, his injured leg nearly buckling multiple times as he forged through the deepest drifts. Ranger stayed close, occasionally pressing against Marcus's leg as if offering support beyond mere physical assistance, a reminder that he wasn't facing this challenge alone. When they finally reached the porch, Marcus used his remaining strength to maneuver the rescue sled up the 3 steps to the cabin door. His hands, despite the insulated gloves, had grown clumsy with cold and fatigue, making the simple task of retrieving his key a frustrating challenge. The door swung open before he could insert the key into the lock. Emma stood in the doorway, bundled in her blankets, her eyes widening at the sight of her mother secured to the rescue sled. "Is Mommy okay?" she asked, her voice small but steady. "She will be," Marcus assured her, pulling the sled across the threshold into the blessed warmth of the cabin. Ranger followed, shaking snow from his coat before moving immediately to Emma's side, pressing his muzzle briefly against her hand as if offering reassurance. "Ranger found you," Emma said, reaching down to stroke the dog's head, "just like he was supposed to." "Yes, he did." Marcus closed the door against the howling wind, sealing them inside the warm sanctuary. "Ranger is a hero. Now we need to help your mom get warm, okay?" The digital clock on the mantel read 21:37, 8 minutes ahead of the deadline he'd given Emma. Despite his exhaustion, a small surge of satisfaction ran through Marcus at having kept his promise to the child. He moved with renewed purpose, transferring Kate from the rescue sled to the sofa closest to the fireplace. Her condition remained stable but precarious, core temperature dangerously low, pulse weak but regular. Experience from wilderness survival training during his military years guided his actions as he slowly, carefully began the process of rewarming her body. Emma watched with solemn attention as Marcus removed Kate's snow-damp outer clothing, replacing it with dry blankets heated near the fire. He worked with clinical precision, his focus entirely on preventing the fatal complications that could arise from warming a hypothermic patient too quickly. "Is Mommy going to wake up soon?" Emma asked, kneeling beside the sofa where her mother lay. "I hope so," Marcus replied honestly. "Her body is very cold, and it needs time to warm up properly. The best thing we can do is keep her comfortable and monitor her closely." Ranger positioned himself at the foot of the sofa, his eyes never leaving Kate's face. The German shepherd's devotion struck Marcus anew. This wasn't simply a pet's attachment, but something deeper, a bond forged through shared experiences and mutual dependence. As Marcus checked Kate's vital signs again, a small hand touched his arm. He looked up to find Emma watching him with an expression too knowing for her young years. "You're hurt," she said simply, pointing to the way he favored his right leg. "Mommy gets that face too when her arm hurts, but she doesn't want me to know." The observation, delivered with a child's directness, caught Marcus off guard. "It's an old injury," he explained after a moment. "Sometimes it bothers me when I work too hard or when it's very cold." Emma nodded sagely. "Mommy says her scars remind her she's strong, not broken." The words struck Marcus with unexpected force. Strong, not broken. How long had he viewed himself through the lens of what he had lost rather than what he had survived? The perspective shift, delivered through a child's innocent repetition of her mother's wisdom, illuminated something Marcus had been unable to see from within his self-imposed isolation. Before he could respond, a soft moan from the sofa drew their attention. Kate Sullivan's eyelids fluttered, her head turning slightly as consciousness began to return. Ranger immediately moved closer, his tail wagging cautiously as he nudged his muzzle against her hand. "Mommy?" Emma called, her voice trembling with hope. Kate's eyes opened slowly, confusion evident in her gaze as she struggled to process her unfamiliar surroundings. Her focus sharpened first on her daughter, recognition bringing immediate relief to her features, then shifted to Ranger, whose presence seemed to confirm that whatever had happened, her faithful companion had fulfilled his duty. Finally, her gaze found Marcus, standing slightly apart from this family unit. In the brief moment before she spoke, he saw the assessment in her eyes, tactical, measuring, categorizing him as threat or ally with the quick efficiency that marked those trained for combat situations. "You found us," she whispered, her voice hoarse but clear. "Actually," Marcus corrected gently, "your dog found me." Kate Sullivan's return to consciousness progressed in stages, each bringing greater clarity and strength to her movements. Marcus observed with clinical detachment, recognizing the signs of someone fighting their way back from the edge of hypothermia. First came the confusion, then recognition of familiar faces, followed by attempts to assess her situation with military precision despite physical weakness. "Emma, sweetheart," Kate said, her voice gaining strength as she reached for her daughter. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Mommy," Emma replied, carefully climbing onto the sofa to nestle against her mother's side. "Ranger found a soldier to help us." Kate's gaze returned to Marcus, more focused now as the fog of disorientation continued to lift. "Former Army Ranger," she said. "Not a question, but an assessment. How did you know where to find us?" Marcus gestured toward the German shepherd, who remained vigilant at Kate's side. "Your partner here showed up at my door, made it clear I needed to follow him. led me straight to your vehicle in the ravine. Kate's hand moved to rest on Ranger's head, fingers automatically finding the spot behind his ears that made the dog's eyes half close in contentment. How far did he go for help? About 3 miles, Marcus answered, through the worst blizzard we've had in years. Kate closed her eyes briefly, a complex emotion crossing her features. Service dogs are trained to find help in emergencies, but the distance he covered in these conditions. She trailed off, looking at Ranger with unmistakable pride. You're going to need extra treats for a month, buddy. The comment, delivered with unexpected humor given her condition, revealed something about Kate Sullivan's character that resonated with Marcus. He recognized the trait from his own military days, the ability to acknowledge the gravity of a situation while refusing to be overwhelmed by it. I need to sit up, Kate said, making a careful attempt to rise. Marcus moved forward. Take it slow. Your core temperature is still below normal. Moving too quickly can send cold blood from your extremities to your heart. Kate paused, recognizing the validity of his caution. Army medic training? Among other things, Marcus acknowledged. Let me help you. With practiced efficiency, he supported her into a seated position, adjusting pillows behind her back. The movement brought them momentarily close, and Marcus caught the scent of engine oil and something citrus beneath the mustiness of damp clothing. Ranger shifted position to accommodate the change, maintaining contact with both Kate and Emma, as if unwilling to let either out of his reach. Once settled, Kate took stock of her surroundings, her gaze sweeping the cabin with tactical assessment. Nice setup you have here. Defensible position, good sight lines to the approach, multiple exit options. The observation confirmed Marcus's growing suspicion that Kate Sullivan was no ordinary veteran. Force recon? He ventured. A slight smile touched her lips. Close, Marine Special Operations, Intelligence Specialist, 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. Marcus nodded, respect coloring his response. Army Rangers, 4 tours, Afghanistan. Medic certification in my final year. The abbreviated exchange carried layers of shared understanding that required no elaboration. Both recognized in the other the distinctive markers of those who had served in elite units, the economy of movement, the situational awareness that, never fully deactivated, the ability to communicate essential information without superfluous detail. Emma looked between them, absorbing the interaction with a child's curiosity. "Are you friends now?" she asked. Kate laughed softly, the sound warming the cabin more effectively than the crackling fire. "Military folk recognize each other, sweetie. Like Ranger can tell which dogs were trained for service and which weren't." The comparison seemed to satisfy Emma, who nestled more comfortably against her mother's side. The little girl's eyelids were growing heavy, the night's extraordinary events finally catching up with her youthful endurance. Marcus moved to the kitchen area, maintaining sightlines to his guests as he prepared hot broth for Kate. "What brought you out in weather like this?" he asked, keeping his tone conversational rather than accusatory. Kate sighed, absently stroking Emma's hair. "Poor judgment, ultimately. We were heading back to Bozeman from my father's place in Missoula. The main highway was closed due to an accident, and the GPS suggested this Forest Service road as an alternate route." She shook her head, frustration evident in the gesture. "I should have known better than to trust civilian technology over common sense, especially with a storm approaching. The GPS didn't account for the condition of these back roads. In winter," Marcus said, returning with a mug of warm broth. "Happens more often than you'd think. Tourists follow their phones right into trouble, especially in these mountains." Kate accepted the mug carefully, allowing the warmth to seep into her hands before taking a tentative sip. "We're not tourists," she corrected mildly. "I grew up in Bozeman, My father moved to Missoula after my mother passed last year. We were visiting for Emma's birthday. The clarification carried a subtle edge that Marcus recognized, the native Montanan's slight bristling at being mistaken for an out-of-stater. He found himself appreciating her instinctive defense of her roots, another point of connection. Between them, "My apologies," he offered with a slight nod. "How's the vehicle? Salvageable?" Kate shook her head. "Doubtful. Front axle is shot, and there's significant frame damage where we hit that boulder. Even if it could be towed out, repairs would likely exceed its value." She glanced toward the window, where snow continued to fall heavily outside. "Not that anyone's getting a tow truck in here until this storm breaks." Marcus nodded his agreement. "County roads won't be cleared until tomorrow at the earliest. Forest Service roads like the one you were on might not see a plow for days." The practical assessment hung in the air between them, its implications clear. Kate and Emma were effectively stranded at his cabin until weather conditions improved significantly. Marcus watched as Kate processed this reality, noting the brief flash of concern that crossed her features before being replaced by calm acceptance. "We've imposed on your hospitality enough already," she said, military courtesy evident in her tone. "If you could help us arrange transportation once the road's clear." "It's not an imposition," Marcus interrupted, surprising himself with the immediacy of his response. "The cabin has plenty of space, and you're in no condition to be moved yet anyway. You and Emma are welcome to stay until we can get you safely back to Bozeman." Kate studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said finally. "That's very generous." Ranger chose that moment to rise, stretching his powerful body before padding over to the door. The German shepherd looked back, at Kate, then at Marcus, his intention obvious even to someone unaccustomed to canine communication. "He needs to go out," Kate explained. "Standard evening routine, storm or no storm." Marcus moved toward the door. "I'll take him. You should stay warm." Kate started to object, then seemed to reconsider as she glanced down at Emma, now sleeping peacefully against her side. "His leash is in my coat pocket. Not that he needs it, but military protocol," Marcus finished for her. "I understand." He retrieved the leash from Kate's snow-dampened coat, which he'd hung near the fire to dry. Ranger approached willingly, standing still as Marcus attached the lead to his collar. The dog's patient compliance spoke of extensive training and discipline, reinforcing Marcus's impression of a highly specialized service animal. "We won't go far," Marcus assured Kate as he opened the door, letting in a brief swirl of snow and frigid air. Once outside, Ranger moved with purpose toward a cluster of trees at the edge of the cleared area around the cabin. Marcus followed, giving the dog sufficient lead while maintaining awareness of their surroundings. The blizzard had begun to moderate slightly, the wind less punishing, though snow continued to fall steadily. Ranger completed his business efficiently, then surprised Marcus by leading him toward the woodpile stacked against the cabin's exterior wall. The German shepherd nosed at the tarp covering the split logs, then looked back at Marcus expectantly. "Wood for the fire?" Marcus asked, somewhat bemused by the dog's apparent foresight. "Good thinking." He gathered an armload of logs, appreciating Ranger's practical suggestion. The cabin's wood stove would need feeding throughout the night, to maintain the warmth essential for Kate's continued recovery. The German shepherd watched with apparent approval, then led the way back to the front door with the confident stride of a soldier completing a mission. Inside, they found Kate still awake, though Emma had surrendered completely to exhaustion. The little girl's soft, regular breathing provided a gentle counterpoint to the crackling of the fire and the occasional moan of wind against the cabin's sturdy walls. "She's resilient," Marcus observed quietly as he added logs to the fire. "Takes after her mother, I'd guess." Kate smiled faintly, her hand continuing its gentle stroking of Emma's hair. "She's tougher than I was at her age. More adaptable, too. Military life means frequent moves, new schools, new faces. She handles it better than most adults would." Ranger returned to his position near the sofa, settling into a sphinx-like pose that allowed him to monitor both the room's occupants and the door. His vigilance, even in this moment of relative safety, spoke volumes about his training and devotion. "How long have you had him?" Marcus asked, nodding toward the German shepherd. 3 years, Kate replied, her expression softening as she regarded her canine companion. "He was assigned to me 2 months after I was wounded in my final deployment." She didn't elaborate on the nature of her injury, and Marcus didn't ask. The unspoken protocol between veterans, allowing each to share or withhold details of their service at their own discretion, created a comfortable space between them. "He's extraordinary," Marcus said instead. "Most service dogs are trained to assist their handlers. The initiative he showed tonight, seeking help for both of you rather than just staying by your side, that's beyond standard training." Kate nodded, pride evident in her gaze as she looked at Ranger. "He's been exceptional from the beginning. Makes me wonder sometimes who's really in charge in our relationship." Her attempt at humor was undercut by the emotion in her voice. "I wouldn't be here without him, in more ways than one." The statement hung in the air, laden with implications that Marcus understood intuitively. Many veterans found their way back from the psychological wounds of combat through the unconditional connection offered by service animals. Ranger's role in Kate's life clearly extended far beyond practical assistance. "You should try to rest," Marcus suggested, noting the fatigue evident in Kate's features despite her determined composure. "Your body needs to recover from the hypothermia. I'll keep the fire going through the night." Kate's instinctive resistance to the suggestion was visible in the straightening of her posture, a reflexive assertion of self-sufficiency that Marcus recognized all too well. Then she glanced down at Emma, still peacefully asleep against her, and her expression softened. "You're right," she conceded, "but wake me in a few hours so you can get some rest too. I'm not completely incapacitated." The compromise acknowledged both her need for recovery and her unwillingness to be merely a passive recipient of assistance, another trait Marcus respected. He nodded his agreement, then fetched additional blankets from a chest near the bedroom. As he helped Kate arrange the blankets around herself and Emma without disturbing the sleeping child, a curious sense of rightness settled over Marcus. The cabin, which for years had felt like little more than a shelter, a place to exist rather than live, suddenly hummed with a different energy. The presence of Kate, Emma, and Ranger had transformed the space, filling it with something Marcus had forgotten how to name. Purpose, perhaps, or connection, or both. He settled into the armchair, positioned to allow clear sightlines to both the door and his guests, Ranger's watchful gaze meeting his in silent acknowledgement of shared responsibility. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the Montana. Night, but within these walls something had shifted irrevocably. For the first time in years, Marcus Brenner was no longer merely surviving. He was, in some fundamental way, beginning to thaw. The cabin settled into midnight stillness as the storm outside gradually lost its fury. Marcus maintained his vigil from the armchair, occasionally rising to add logs to the fire or check on Kate's condition. Her color had improved significantly over the past few hours, and her breathing had deepened into the rhythm of healing sleep. Emma remained curled against her mother, one small hand clutching her stuffed rabbit, while the other rested lightly on Ranger's fur where the dog lay pressed against the sofa. Marcus found his gaze repeatedly drawn to this improvised family unit. There was something compelling about their unconscious positioning, Kate's protective arm around Emma, even in sleep, the child's instinctive trust in her mother's presence, Ranger's steadfast vigilance, despite his own exhaustion and injuries. They formed a complete circuit of mutual protection and care, each looking after the others in ways both obvious and subtle. The scene stirred something in Marcus that he had deliberately suppressed for years, a recognition of the fundamental human need for connection that he had denied himself in the aftermath of his trauma, his isolation, initially a defense mechanism. Against the overwhelming sensory chaos that accompanied his PTSD, had gradually transformed into a way of life. The cabin had become both sanctuary and prison, keeping the world at bay while simultaneously preventing any meaningful re-engagement with it. A soft whimper from Emma broke the silence, her small face contorting slightly as whatever dream occupied her sleep took a frightening turn. Before Marcus could rise from his chair, Ranger lifted his head, gently nosing the child's hand. The simple contact appeared to soothe her immediately, her expression relaxing as she settled back into peaceful slumber. The German shepherd's eyes met Marcus's across the room, a moment of silent communication passing between them. Then Ranger carefully extracted himself from his position and padded over to where Marcus sat, settling at his feet with a soft sigh. "Taking a break from guard duty?" Marcus whispered, reaching down to scratch behind the dog's ears. Ranger leaned into the touch, his vigilance momentarily softening under the simple pleasure of human contact. The dog's trust, offered without reservation despite their brief acquaintance, felt like both gift and responsibility. "You're quite something," Marcus continued, keeping his voice low to avoid disturbing the sleepers. "Traveling through a blizzard with an injured leg to find help, leading me back through the storm, staying focused on your mission the entire time." He shook his head in admiration. "Some of the human soldiers I served with couldn't have done better." Ranger tilted his head slightly, as if considering the compliment. The intelligence in his gaze was unmistakable, not merely animal awareness, but something deeper, a comprehension that transcended the usual boundaries between species. A soft voice from the sofa interrupted their silent communion. "He understands more than you might think." Marcus looked up to find Kate awake, her eyes reflecting the firelight as she carefully shifted position to avoid disturbing Emma. Ranger immediately returned to her side, receiving a gentle pat of acknowledgement. "Sorry if I woke you," Marcus said. Kate shook her head. "Military sleep habits die hard. I've been cycling through light sleep for the past hour, doing system checks." She stretched cautiously, testing her body's responses. Temperatures normalized, extremities functioning without numbness, no symptoms of pulmonary complications. The self-assessment, delivered with clinical detachment, confirmed Marcus's earlier impression of Kate as someone accustomed to operating under challenging physical conditions. He rose, moving to the kitchen area to prepare fresh tea. "Ranger seems remarkably well-trained, even for a service dog," he commented as he set water to boil. Kate watched her canine companion with evident pride. He was part of an experimental program combining traditional service dog training with more specialized tactical applications. Usually those are separate tracks, dogs trained either for veteran support or for military operations. Ranger's one of a dozen prototypes that received integrated training. Marcus returned with 2 steaming mugs, offering one to Kate, who accepted it with a nod of thanks. That explains his response tonight. The situational assessment, the decision to seek specific help rather than just staying with you. "He's been remarkable from the beginning," Kate agreed, sipping the hot liquid carefully. "When I was at my lowest point after being wounded, he seemed to understand exactly what I needed, sometimes before I knew myself." The statement contained layers that Marcus hesitated to probe directly. Instead, he asked, "Was he with you during your service?" Kate shook her head. "No, I was paired with him afterward during rehabilitation. My injuries were complicated. some visible, others not. She tapped her temple lightly with her free hand, the gesture conveying what went unsaid. But the psychological impact of combat. The physical recovery was straightforward. The rest. She shrugged, a small movement that nevertheless conveyed volumes. "I understand," Marcus said simply. And he did, intimately, profoundly, understand the complex aftermath of combat trauma, the ways it rewired both brain and spirit, the nightmares, the hypervigilance, the difficulty reintegrating into civilian society where people moved through life unaware of how quickly everything could change. Kate studied him over the rim of her mug, her gaze assessing but not invasive. "Afghanistan?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded, appreciating her perception. Different combat theaters often left distinctive marks on those who served in them. Kunar province mostly. My final tour ended near Asadabad. Something flickered. In Kate's expression, recognition, perhaps, or shared knowledge of that particularly challenging region. "IED?" she ventured, glancing briefly at his right leg. "Yes." The single syllable contained years of pain, rehabilitation, and adaptation. "Took out our transport. 3 didn't make it. 2 of us did, more or less." He hadn't spoken of the incident aloud in years, yet the words came with unexpected ease. Something about Kate's presence, her understanding born of similar experiences, created a space where such truths could be acknowledged without the usual burden of explanation or justification. "I was in Helmand," Kate offered after a moment, "intelligence operations primarily, until a night raid went sideways and I took shrapnel through the shoulder and neck." She gestured toward the thin scar along her jawline that Marcus had noticed earlier. "Missed the carotid by millimeters. Doctor said he'd never seen anyone that lucky." "Doesn't feel like luck at the time," Marcus observed. "No," Kate agreed softly. "It doesn't." They fell into companionable silence, each respecting the other's journey without requiring further elaboration. The fire popped and hissed in the wood stove, casting dancing shadows across the cabin's interior. Outside, the wind had diminished to an occasional moan rather than the constant howl of earlier hours. "You're set up here," Kate said finally, gesturing around the cabin with her mug. "It's impressive. Self-sufficient, defensible, isolated, without being inaccessible." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "Reminds me of some of the veterans I've known who found conventional reintegration challenging." The observation, gently delivered but piercing in its accuracy, might have triggered defensiveness in Marcus under different circumstances. Instead, he found himself considering it with unexpected objectivity. "When I first came here, it was supposed to be temporary," he admitted, "a place to decompress before figuring out next steps. Then temporary became indefinite, and eventually," he shrugged, "it became easier not to leave." Kate nodded, no judgment in her expression. "Makes sense. No unpredictable variables, no civilians who don't understand, no well-meaning questions about service that you're not ready to answer." She took another sip of tea. "Been there myself, just in a different way. Threw myself into physical therapy, then work, then Emma's schedule. Built a life so structured and busy that I didn't have to deal with what was actually happening inside." The parallel struck Marcus with its accuracy. Different approaches to the same fundamental challenge, creating systems that allowed functioning while avoiding true healing. "What changed for you?" he asked, genuinely curious about her journey. Kate's gaze shifted to Ranger, who lay alert but relaxed at her feet. "Him, primarily. The program that placed him with me included mandatory therapy, not just training sessions for Ranger, but actual psychological counseling for me. I resisted at first, went through the motions to check the boxes." A smile touched her lips, but Ranger had this way of giving me the most disappointed look when I came back from a session I hadn't fully engaged with. like he knew I was shortchanging myself. Marcus found himself smiling in response. Dogs have that gift, seeing through our defenses. Exactly. And unlike people, they don't have an agenda or expectations about how your healing should look. They just want you present and authentic, whatever that means for you. Kate's hand moved to stroke Ranger's head, the gesture automatic yet full of meaning. Eventually I stopped fighting the process and started actually doing the work, not for the program administrators or the therapists or even for Emma, though she benefited enormously. I did it because somehow this four-legged battle buddy made me want to be fully alive again, not just going through the motions. The simple testimony resonated with Marcus more deeply than any clinical explanation of PTSD recovery ever had. He looked at Ranger with new appreciation, understanding that the German Shepherd's excellence in crisis was matched by a more subtle gift, the ability to guide his handler back to authentic engagement with life. "He led you home in more ways than one," Marcus observed. Kate's expression softened. "Yes, and tonight he did it again, quite literally." She glanced toward the window, where pre-dawn light had begun to illuminate the snow-covered landscape. The storm's breaking. Marcus followed her gaze, noting the subtle shift in the quality of darkness outside. The cloud bank was thinning, allowing the first hint of approaching dawn to filter through. The snow had stopped entirely, leaving behind a transformed world of pristine white drifts and ice-coated branches that gleamed in the growing light. "The county will start clearing main roads once full daylight hits," he said. "But the forest, service road where you went off, might not see attention for days." Kate nodded, practical considerations replacing philosophical reflection. "I need to contact my father in Missoula. He'll be worried when we don't check in. Is there cell service out here?" "Spotty at best, especially after a storm like this," Marcus replied. "But I have a satellite phone for emergencies. We can try that once it's fully light." "Thank you," Kate said sincerely, "for everything. I'm not sure Emma and I would have survived without your help." The gratitude, straightforward and unembellished, caused an unexpected tightness in Marcus's chest. He had grown so accustomed to isolation that simple human acknowledgement felt almost overwhelming in its impact. "I didn't do much," he deflected. "Ranger did the real work, finding me and leading me to you." Kate studied him with quiet perception. "You followed a strange dog into a blizzard without knowing what you'd find. You pulled me from a wrecked vehicle, brought me back to your home, and provided medical care that likely saved my life. That's not much, Marcus." The use of his name, which he realized he had never actually provided during their earlier exchange of military backgrounds, caught him off guard. Kate noted his surprise and smiled slightly. "Your mail was on the counter," she explained, nodding toward the small stack of envelopes visible on the kitchen surface. "I noticed when you were making tea earlier. Hope you don't mind the reconnaissance." Old habits. The admission, delivered with a hint of humor despite its acknowledgement of ingrained operational security habits, drew an unexpected chuckle from Marcus. "Marine intel specialist indeed," he conceded. "Situational awareness intact, even while recovering from hypothermia." Their shared laughter, quiet to avoid waking Emma but genuine in its connection, filled the cabin with a warmth distinct from that provided by the fire. In that moment, Marcus recognized something he had been missing during his years of self-imposed isolation. The unique understanding that came from shared experience, the relief of being fully seen and understood without explanation or apology. As dawn continued to brighten the eastern sky, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible 24 hours earlier. When Kate and Emma were ready to return to Bozeman, he would accompany them, not merely arranging transportation, but personally ensuring their safe journey. It would mean leaving the cabin, engaging with the outside world, stepping beyond the carefully constructed boundaries of his isolated existence. The prospect brought both anxiety and, surprisingly, anticipation. Like a limb too long held immobile, his capacity for connection had atrophied but not disappeared entirely. "I should check the satellite phone, make sure it's charged," Marcus said, rising from his chair. "And perhaps start on breakfast? Emma will probably be hungry when she wakes." Kate's smile contained understanding beyond his simple suggestions. "That sounds perfect," she replied. "I think we're all ready for a new day." Dawn arrived with crystalline clarity, transforming the brutal blizzard landscape into a scene of breathtaking beauty. Sunlight reflected off pristine snowdrifts, creating a diamond-like brilliance that flooded Marcus's cabin with natural light. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a world renewed and redefined by its power. Marcus stood at the kitchen window, satellite phone in hand after completing a brief call to Kate's father in Missoula. The conversation had been straightforward. Yes, Kate and Emma were safe. Yes, they had shelter and food. Yes, arrangements would be made to get them home once roads were passable. The older man's relief had been palpable, even through the sometimes patchy connection, his gruff thanks conveying emotions that transcended the occasional static. In the main room, Kate sat with Emma at the small dining table, both enjoying the simple breakfast Marcus had prepared. Oatmeal with dried berries, supplemented with the last of his fresh eggs. Ranger lay nearby, his watchful presence a constant. Even in this moment of domestic tranquility, the German shepherd had accepted the food Marcus offered with dignified appreciation, his manners impeccable despite his obvious hunger. "Grandpa says you're a hero," Emma announced, looking up from her oatmeal when Marcus returned from the call. "He says we would have been popsicles without you." Kate smiled apologetically. "My father has a way with words, but he is extremely grateful, as are we." Marcus set the satellite phone on the counter, oddly discomforted by the praise. "Just did what anyone would do," he replied, focusing on pouring fresh coffee rather than meeting their gazes. "Not true," Kate countered gently. "Most people wouldn't. Follow a strange dog into a blizzard, Marcus. Most people would have closed their door and called animal control in the morning, if that." Before Marcus could formulate a response, Emma added with a child's directness, "Ranger only picks special people. That's what Mommy says." The simple statement hung in the air as Marcus finally looked up, finding Kate's eyes on him with an expression that confirmed her daughter's words. Something unspoken passed between them, an acknowledgement that Ranger's choice to seek help, specifically from Marcus, had not been random, but rather the result of the German shepherd's uncanny ability to assess human character. "The roads are still impassable," Marcus said, changing the subject to more practical matters. With practiced aim, he launched the snowball at a distant pine branch, dislodging a shower of snow that cascaded downward in a glittering display. Emma gasped in delight, immediately attempting to mimic his technique. Her first efforts produced misshapen lumps that disintegrated upon throwing, but Marcus guided her hands patiently, showing her how to pack the snow properly. Kate watched from the porch steps, something soft and appreciative in her expression as she observed the interaction. Soon Emma was successfully launching her own snowballs, her aim improving with each throw. Her laughter, bright and uninhibited, rang out in the clear mountain air, the sound so purely joyful that Marcus found himself smiling in response. "Your turn, Mommy," Emma called, offering a carefully crafted snowball to Kate. Kate hesitated, only briefly before joining them in the cleared area, accepting the snowy missile with mock seriousness. "Target, Sergeant Emma." Emma giggled at the military formality, pointing to a snow-laden branch similar to the one Marcus had targeted earlier. "That one, Captain Mommy." Kate's throw was precise and powerful, striking the branch exactly at its weakest point and releasing an impressive cascade of snow. The display earned applause from Emma and a raised eyebrow of appreciation from Marcus. "Nice arm," he commented. "Junior varsity softball pitcher before I enlisted," Kate explained with a small shrug. "Some skills never fade." Their eyes met, briefly over Emma's head, another moment of connection forming between them, the recognition of how certain abilities remained intact despite everything else that had changed after their respective military services. Some training, both formal and informal, became so deeply integrated that it survived even the most profound transformations of identity and circumstance. The morning continued with increasingly elaborate snow activities. Marcus showed Emma how to make snow angels, demonstrating the technique before helping her create her own. Kate constructed a miniature snow fort, her architectural approach revealing the tactical thinking that informed even her recreational endeavors. Through it all, Ranger maintained his vigilant observation from the porch, occasionally woofing soft encouragement when Emma looked his way. Eventually, Emma's energy began to flag, her earlier excitement giving way to the fatigue that often follows intense play in cold conditions. Kate noticed immediately, suggesting they return inside to warm up before making further plans for their departure. As they brushed snow from their clothing at the cabin door, Emma looked up at Marcus with sincere gratitude. "This is the best snow day ever," she declared definitively. "Even better than when we went to the big ski hill and Grandpa bought me hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. County plows will tackle the main highway first, then work outward to secondary roads. The Forest Service road where you went off won't be a priority." Kate nodded, military pragmatism evident in her immediate shift to tactical planning. "Options? 3 possibilities," Marcus replied, settling into the familiar rhythm of operational assessment. "First, we wait until roads are clear enough for conventional transport, likely 2 to 3 days minimum. Second, I snowshoe to the main road once it's plowed, hitch to town, and arrange for specialized retrieval. Third—" He hesitated. "Briefly, I have a snowmobile in the shed. It's older but reliable, could transport all of us to the highway junction, about 7 miles east. Assuming county crews clear that section today, we could arrange pickup from there." "The snowmobile sounds like our best option," Kate said without hesitation. "I don't want to impose on your hospitality longer than necessary, and my father would drive out to the junction to meet us if I can call him again later." Marcus nodded, impressed by her quick decision-making and lack of unnecessary deliberation. "We should check the forecast first. If another system moves in, we'd be better waiting it out. Mommy, can I play in the snow first?" Emma interjected, her priorities distinctly different from the adults. "I've never seen snow this deep before." Kate exchanged a glance with Marcus, silently seeking his input on her daughter's request. The deference surprised him, a small but significant acknowledgement that they were in his territory. "The temperature has risen considerably since last night," he offered. "As long as she's properly bundled up, a brief time outside would be safe. Might be good for all of us to get some fresh air while we can." The relief in Emma's expression was palpable, her excitement bubbling over as she bounced slightly in her chair. "Can Ranger come too? He loves snow." At the sound of his name, the German shepherd's ears perked forward, his tail thumping once against the wooden floor in what appeared to be anticipation. "Ranger needs to rest his leg," Kate reminded her daughter gently. "Remember how he hurt himself helping us." Emma's face fell momentarily before brightening again. "Maybe he can just watch from the porch so he doesn't feel left out." The consideration in the child's suggestion, her concern for the dog's feelings rather than just her own disappointment, revealed much about the values Kate was instilling in her daughter. Marcus found himself increasingly impressed by this. Small family unit, their relationship speaking of deep mutual respect and care. "I think that's an excellent compromise," Kate agreed, running a hand over Emma's hair affectionately. "Let's get you bundled up properly first." While Kate helped Emma into her snow gear, supplemented with additional layers borrowed from Marcus's supplies, Marcus stepped outside to assess conditions. The temperature hovered around 20 degrees Fahrenheit, practically balmy compared to the previous night's deadly cold. The snow had settled overnight, forming a crust strong enough to support lightweight in most places. Perfect conditions for the child's first proper experience with Montana's winter bounty. He shoveled a path from the cabin door to a relatively flat area where Emma could play safely, the physical labor warming his body despite the chill air. The exertion felt good after the tense hours of the previous night, a simple, productive task that allowed his mind to process the unexpected events that had transformed his solitary existence. By the time he finished clearing a suitable play area, Kate and Emma had emerged from the cabin. Emma's excitement was barely contained as she took in the winter wonderland surrounding them, her eyes wide with wonder at the transformed landscape. Ranger followed, moving carefully to avoid putting weight on his injured leg, and settled regally on the porch where he could observe the proceedings. "Watch this, Emma," Marcus said, scooping up a handful of snow and packing it into a perfect sphere. The comparison, delivered with a child's earnest belief in its significance, struck Marcus unexpectedly. How long had it been since he'd participated in creating joy for another person? How many seasons had passed with him viewing snow as merely an environmental challenge rather than a source of delight? Inside, as Kate helped Emma change into dry clothes, Marcus checked the latest weather updates on his emergency radio. The news was promising. County crews had indeed begun clearing the main highway, working outward from the town center. The junction he'd mentioned as a potential pickup point would likely be accessible by early afternoon. "Good news," he announced. When Kate rejoined him, Emma now settled on the sofa with Ranger, both apparently ready for a brief rest after their exertions. "They're making better progress than expected with road clearing. If your father can meet us at Pinewood Junction, we could head out in about 2 hours. "Moko," Kate nodded, relief evident in her expression. "I'll call him again to confirm." She paused, then added more softly, "Thank you, Marcus, for everything." The simple gratitude, unadorned but deeply sincere, caused that now familiar tightness in his chest, the physical manifestation of emotions long suppressed, suddenly finding expression. Rather than dismiss it as he had earlier, Marcus acknowledged it with a slight nod. "It's been—" He searched for the right word, finding conventional terms inadequate for the experience. "Illuminating," he finished finally. Kate's understanding smile suggested she grasped the layers beneath his chosen descriptor. "Yes," she agreed. "It has been—" As she moved toward the satellite phone, Marcus began gathering supplies for their journey, extra blankets for the snowmobile, emergency rations in case of unexpected delays, a first aid kit as standard precaution. The methodical preparation helped focus his thoughts, which had begun swirling with unexpected questions about what would happen after he delivered Kate, Emma, and Ranger safely to their destination. For years, his existence had followed predictable patterns, the cabin serving as both refuge and boundary. Now, having breached those boundaries to rescue strangers who had quickly become something more than that, Marcus found himself contemplating possibilities beyond his self-imposed isolation. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating, like the moment in military freefall training when the aircraft door opened and the jump light turned green. That suspended instant of knowing that everything would change with the next step, that there would be no returning to the previous state of being. The only choice was forward, into open air and whatever awaited below. Kate's voice interrupted. His metaphorical freefall, her conversation with her father concluded. "Dad will meet us at the junction at 3 o'clock, she reported. "He's borrowing my uncle's truck with snow chains, just to be safe." Marcus nodded, continuing his preparations with renewed purpose. "We should leave by 1 then, allows extra time for any difficult terrain." Kate moved to help him, their coordination automatic and efficient as they organized necessary items. Neither spoke much, but the silence between them held a comfortable quality, the unforced companionship of two people who understood each other's methods and priorities without need for constant verification. After a while, Kate paused in her work, her gaze finding Marcus's with unexpected intensity. "What will you do?" she asked quietly. "After we're gone?" The directness of the question caught him off guard, though he realized it had been hovering unspoken between them for hours. What would he do? Return to his isolated routine as if the past 18 hours had never happened? Retreat back into the carefully constructed fortress of solitude that had been both his protection and his prison? For the first time in years, that path suddenly seemed impossible to contemplate. "I'm not sure," he admitted, the honesty feeling like a risk and a relief simultaneously. "I haven't thought beyond getting you all safely back." Kate held his gaze steadily, neither pushing nor retreating from the moment of vulnerability. "Sometimes the hardest part of a mission is figuring out what happens after completion," she offered, the observation drawn clearly from personal experience. Marcus nodded, recognizing the truth in her words. How many times in his military career had he focused entirely on the objective at hand, only to find himself adrift in the aftermath of success? The pattern had continued into his civilian life, though the missions had become increasingly small and personal until they shrank to mere survival. "I think," he said slowly, the words forming as he spoke them, "it might be time for a new mission." The statement hung in the air between them, simple in construction, but profound in implication. Kate's expression softened with understanding, her nod conveying recognition of both the declaration's significance and the courage it required. "Those tend to be the most worthwhile kind," she replied softly. From the sofa, Emma's voice joined their conversation, her resting period apparently concluded. "Are we going home soon?" Kate turned toward her daughter, her expression warming with maternal affection. "Yes, sweetheart. Mr. Marcus is going to take us to meet Grandpa this afternoon." "On a snowmobile?" Emma asked, eyes widening with renewed excitement. "Like in the movies?" "Exactly like in the movies," Marcus confirmed, finding himself smiling at her enthusiasm. "Except we'll go a bit slower to keep everyone safe." Emma nodded solemnly, accepting the safety caveat with surprising maturity. Then her expression grew thoughtful, a small furrow appearing between her brows. "Will you come visit us after? In Bozeman, you could meet my teacher. She was in the army too, but not the special kind like you and Mommy." The innocent invitation, delivered with a child's straightforward expectation of acceptance, created a moment of suspended possibility. In the cabin, Marcus found his gaze drawn to Kate, searching for her reaction to her daughter's suggestion. What he found in Kate's expression was neither embarrassment nor dismissal, but rather an open curiosity, as if Emma had simply voiced a question Kate herself had been considering, but hadn't yet found the right moment to ask. In that instant, Marcus recognized that the path forward wasn't about dramatic decisions or complete transformations. It was about small steps, each one leading naturally to the next. Following a German shepherd into a blizzard, rescuing a mother and child, playing in the snow, and now, perhaps, maintaining the connections that fate, or a remarkably intuitive service dog, had initiated. "I think," Marcus said carefully, addressing Emma but fully aware of Kate's attentive presence, "that I would like that very much." The simple affirmation felt like another step into open air, another moment of choosing forward motion over the safety of the known. But this time, unlike his military jumps or even his decision to follow Ranger into the storm, Marcus wasn't falling alone, and somehow that made all the difference. Preparations for departure proceeded with military precision as the early afternoon approached. Marcus methodically inventoried their supplies, cross-checking each item against mental contingency scenarios. The snowmobile, a resilient Arctic cat that had weathered multiple Montana winters, had been thoroughly inspected, its mechanical condition verified through a series of systematic tests. Kate assisted with equal efficiency, organizing their minimal luggage while ensuring Emma remained properly outfitted for the journey ahead. Her movements displayed the same deliberate economy Marcus recognized from his own training. No wasted motion, no unnecessary steps. Every action serving a specific purpose within the larger mission framework. The snowmobile can accommodate 3 passengers with some adjustments, Marcus explained as he completed final preparations in the storage shed adjacent to the cabin. I'll drive with Emma secured between us. That provides maximum stability and protection for her during transit. Kate nodded her approval of the arrangement. What about Ranger? His injury complicates things. Marcus had anticipated this concern. I've modified the equipment sled to serve as transport for him. It's cushioned with blankets and secured with a specialized harness system that will prevent any shifting during travel. The configuration distributes weight optimally while ensuring his injured leg remains immobilized. The solution reflected Marcus's thoroughness, his ability to adapt resources to meet unexpected challenges. Kate examined the modified sled, noting the careful attention to both functional requirements and Ranger's comfort. Her expression conveyed professional appreciation for the technical solution alongside personal gratitude for the consideration shown to her canine partner. This is impressive work, she acknowledged, running a hand along the reinforced edge of the sled. Military innovation at its finest. Adaptation and improvisation, sometimes the most valuable skills from our training, Marcus replied, making final adjustments to the tow connection. Emma watched these preparations with fascination, absorbing the methodical approach both adults brought to the task. The little girl had bundled herself in multiple layers according to Kate's instructions, resembling a colorful marshmallow as she carefully transferred her few belongings into the waterproof bag Marcus had provided. Is Ranger going to be okay? On the sled? She asked, concern evident in her voice as she observed the German shepherd resting nearby. Marcus knelt to her level, understanding the importance of addressing her worry directly. Ranger's going to be perfectly fine, Emma. We've made him a special compartment that's almost like a little bed. He's going to be comfortable and secure, and we'll check on him regularly during our journey. Emma considered this information with endearing seriousness. He was very brave last night. He deserves the best sled. You're absolutely right, Marcus agreed, and that's exactly what we've made for him, the very best sled for a very brave dog. The child's concern for Ranger's well-being, placing it above her own excitement about the snowmobile ride, spoke volumes about the values Kate had instilled in her daughter. Marcus found himself increasingly impressed by this small family unit, their relationships characterized by mutual respect and genuine care that extended naturally to include Ranger as a full-fledged member. As the departure time approached, Marcus conducted a final weather assessment using his emergency radio. Conditions remained favorable: clear skies, moderate temperatures, and minimal wind. The county road crews had progressed faster than initially reported, with the junction now confirmed clear and accessible. We should reach Pinewood Junction well before your father arrives, Marcus informed Kate as they made final preparations inside the cabin. The route is straightforward, though we'll need to navigate one particularly steep section about halfway through the journey. Kate nodded, her expression reflecting the focus of someone mentally mapping terrain and anticipating potential challenges. Any alternative routes if we encounter obstacles? Two options, Marcus confirmed, retrieving a topographical map from a drawer and spreading it on the table. He traced primary and secondary routes with his finger, highlighting key landmarks and potential hazard zones. This eastern approach offers gentler elevation changes but adds approximately 2 miles. The western alternative provides more tree cover if wind conditions change, but includes this narrow passage between rock formations. The detailed contingency planning might have seemed excessive for a 7-mile journey under improving conditions, but Kate received the information with clear appreciation. Both understood that in wilderness settings, particularly following severe weather events, thorough preparation often meant the difference between routine travel and life-threatening situations. Primary route looks optimal given current conditions, Kate assessed, studying the map carefully. The sled attachment limits our maneuverability, so wider passages would be preferable even with the steeper section. Marcus nodded, acknowledging the sound tactical evaluation. Their collaborative decision-making flowed naturally, each recognizing and respecting the other's expertise without ego or unnecessary deference. Emma approached the table, standing on tiptoes to see the map. "Is that where we're going?" she asked, pointing to the marked junction. "That's right," Marcus confirmed. "We'll travel along this path here, and your grandfather will meet us at this spot." He indicated the relevant locations, including Emma in the planning process, rather than dismissing her question. The little girl studied the map intently. "It looks like a treasure map," she declared finally. "Are there dragons along the way?" The imaginative leap brought unexpected smiles to both adults' faces. "No dragons confirmed in this sector," Marcus replied with mock seriousness. "But we'll maintain vigilant observation just in case." Kate checked her watch, a rugged military-style timepiece similar to the one Marcus wore. 1,300 hours, she noted. Optimal departure time if we want to reach the junction with appropriate safety margin. Marcus began the systematic shutdown of cabin systems, adjusting the wood stove to minimum sustainable heat, securing windows and unnecessary electrical systems, and performing a final sweep for any overlooked items. Each action completed the transition from unexpected emergency shelter back to solitary outpost, though something about the space had fundamentally changed during Kate and Emma's brief residence within it. Outside, Marcus performed a final inspection of the snowmobile while Kate helped Emma into her position. Ranger watched these preparations attentively, his intelligence evident in the way he assessed their activities. When Marcus approached with the specialized harness, the German shepherd rose without prompting and positioned himself for proper attachment, his cooperation demonstrating both exceptional training and intuitive understanding. "You really do understand everything, don't you?" Marcus commented as he secured the harness with careful attention to the dog's injured leg. Ranger's steady gaze seemed to confirm this assessment. Marcus had worked with military working dogs during his service, but never one that displayed Ranger's remarkable combination of tactical awareness and emotional intelligence. The German shepherd's performance throughout this unexpected mission, from his initial decision to seek specific help through his continued assistance despite personal injury, represented a level of operational excellence that would have earned commendations in any military unit. Once Ranger was properly secured in the modified sled, Marcus performed a final communication check with the satellite phone. "Reception confirmed. Battery at 87%. We'll maintain scheduled check-ins at 30-minute intervals." Kate nodded, appreciating the systematic approach. "Emma's secure," she reported, indicating where she had double-checked. Her daughter's position and safety restraints. With all preparations complete, Marcus took his position at the controls, the familiar sense of pre-mission focus settling over him. Kate mounted behind Emma, her arms forming an additional protective barrier around her daughter, while maintaining secure contact with the snowmobile's frame. "Communications check," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly in the cold air. "Communications. Functional," Kate confirmed from her position. "Emma, can you hear me clearly?" Marcus asked, including the child in their operational protocols. "Yes, sir," Emma replied with enthusiastic formality, clearly enjoying being treated as an important member of the team. From his position in the sled, Ranger offered a single, authoritative bark that seemed to indicate his own readiness status. "Mission parameters confirmed," Marcus announced, the familiar military terminology feeling appropriate for this collaborative endeavor. "Departure commencing." The snowmobile engine roared to life, its powerful rumble cutting through the winter stillness. Marcus guided the vehicle carefully away from the cabin, maintaining reduced speed until he confirmed optimal performance of both the snowmobile and the tethered sled. Ranger remained perfectly positioned, his training evident in his ability to maintain stability despite the movement beneath him. As they gained distance from the cabin, Marcus found himself glancing back once, taking in the sight of the structure that had been his solitary refuge for so long. The morning sun illuminated its sturdy construction, smoke rising in a thin column from the chimney, a scene that had represented safety and isolation for years. Now, something about that image had shifted in his perception. The cabin remained, a haven, but perhaps no longer a hiding place. The first leg of their journey took them through the wooded area east of the cabin, where sunlight filtered through snow-laden branches to create dappled patterns across their path. Marcus navigated with careful precision, maintaining awareness of the sled's position while identifying optimal routes through the varying snow depths. Emma's delighted laughter occasionally pierced the engine's steady rumble as she experienced the thrill of snowmobile travel for the first time. Her joy proved contagious, bringing smiles to both adults despite the serious focus required for safe transit. Even Ranger seemed to share in the positive atmosphere, his alert posture suggesting engagement rather than mere tolerance of the journey. They reached the halfway point in good time, approaching the steeper section Marcus had identified during planning. He reduced speed, shifting his weight slightly to maintain optimal balance as they began the ascent. Kate mirrored his movements. Instinctively, her body language demonstrating the kinesthetic awareness developed through military training. "Steeper grade ahead," Marcus called over his shoulder. "Maintain current position and prepare for increased angle." "Understood," Kate confirmed, securing her grip while ensuring Emma remained properly positioned between them. The snowmobile handled the incline admirably, its power sufficient for their combined weight, even with the added burden of the sled. Marcus navigated around several fallen branches partially obscured by snow, his route selection reflecting both experience and careful risk assessment. Throughout the ascent, he maintained awareness of Ranger's status through periodic visual checks, ensuring the German Shepherd's comfort and security. As they crested the ridge, a panoramic vista opened before them. Miles of pristine wilderness, transformed by the recent storm into a breathtaking landscape of untouched white expanse, punctuated by evergreen sentinels. The beauty arrested them momentarily, a collective pause to appreciate nature's grandeur before continuing their journey. "It's like a whole different world," Emma observed with wide-eyed wonder. "Like we discovered a magic kingdom no one else knows about." The child's perspective, seeing enchantment rather than isolation in the remote terrain, offered a fresh lens through which both adults could view their surroundings. Marcus found himself reconsidering the landscape he had navigated for years, seeing it anew through Emma's eyes. What had become merely familiar territory in his perception regained something of its inherent magnificence through her unfiltered appreciation. The remaining distance to Pinewood Junction proceeded without incident, the terrain gradually transitioning from wilderness to more regularly traversed areas. Evidence of road-clearing operations became visible as they approached their destination, plowed sections marking the boundaries of civilization's reach into the wild expanse. They arrived at the junction 40 minutes ahead of the scheduled rendezvous with Kate's father. The area consisted of a small, cleared space where 3 Forest Service roads converged at the county highway, a utilitarian waypoint marked only by directional signage and a weather-beaten information board displaying faded maps and regulations. Marcus brought the snowmobile to a careful stop in a position that offered both visibility for approaching vehicles and protection from any passing traffic. After securing the engine, he helped Kate and Emma dismount before attending to Ranger, who had maintained perfect composure throughout the journey. "You did great, buddy," Marcus acknowledged as he carefully released the German Shepherd from the transportation harness. Ranger stretched cautiously, favoring his injured leg, but showing no signs of increased distress from the travel. His first action upon being freed was to check on Emma, approaching the child with gentle attention that elicited happy giggles as she knelt to embrace him. "See, I told you Ranger would have the best sled ride ever," Emma informed Marcus with absolute certainty. "He's not even tired." "You were right," Marcus agreed, unable to resist smiling at her enthusiasm. "He's an exceptional traveler." Kate surveyed their surroundings with the habitual situational awareness of someone trained to identify both tactical advantages and potential threats. "Good position," she commented, nodding toward Marcus's selected waiting area. "Optimal visibility, while maintaining defensive options." The observation confirmed their shared perspective, both automatically assessing environments through the lens of military training, finding security in systematic evaluation and strategic positioning. Even in this relatively safe circumstance, those ingrained habits provided a foundation of competence and control. As they settled into the waiting period before Kate's father would arrive, Marcus found himself experiencing an unexpected reluctance for the journey to end. The partnership that had formed between them, forged initially through crisis but evolved into something more nuanced during their brief time together, had awakened aspects of himself long dormant. The realization crystallized as he watched Kate helping Emma build a small snowman near the junction marker, Ranger supervising their efforts with dignified interest. This improvised family unit had breached his isolation not through force or demand, but through authentic connection, through the simple act of allowing him to be useful, valued, and seen. For years, Marcus had defined himself primarily by what he had lost: comrades, purpose, physical wholeness, integration with civilian society. His retreat to the cabin had been framed as recovery, but had gradually transformed into avoidance, his isolation becoming both symptom and perpetuating factor in his disconnection. Now, standing at this literal and figurative junction, Marcus recognized the opportunity before him. The path forward wasn't about dramatic transformation or abandoning everything he had built. Rather, it invited strategic expansion, maintaining the sanctuary he had created while cautiously extending bridges back toward meaningful engagement. Kate approached as he stood contemplating these possibilities, her expression suggesting she sensed something of his internal dialogue. "Everything okay?" she asked, her tone offering space for either confirmation or elaboration. "Better than okay, I think," Marcus replied with unexpected candor, "just realizing some things about directions and destinations." Kate nodded, understanding evident in her gaze. "The mission after the mission," she observed quietly. "Exactly. That," Marcus confirmed, appreciating her intuitive grasp of his meaning without requiring detailed explanation. Their conversation paused as Emma called for Kate's assessment of the snowman's increasingly precarious structural integrity. As Kate moved to assist her daughter, Marcus found himself considering Emma's earlier invitation to visit them in Bozeman. What had initially seemed like a child's casual suggestion now represented something more significant. A concrete opportunity to begin rebuilding connections beyond his self-imposed boundaries. The sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention to the recently plowed highway. A rugged pickup truck with snow chains and roof-mounted auxiliary lights appeared around the bend, proceeding cautiously toward the junction. Kate raised her hand in acknowledgement as the vehicle slowed, confirming this was indeed her father arriving for their rendezvous. As the truck came to a stop and an older man emerged, his military bearing evident despite civilian clothing and advancing years, Marcus recognized that this moment represented not an ending, but a beginning. The rescue mission was complete, but the journey it had initiated was just taking form. And for the first time in years, Marcus felt genuinely ready to discover where that journey might lead. Kate's father, James Sullivan, emerged from his truck, with the deliberate movements of a man well acquainted with winter conditions and military precision. His weathered face bore the unmistakable hallmarks of both aging and authority. Deep lines around keen eyes that assessed the situation with a single, sweeping glance. Despite being in his mid-60s, he carried himself with the straight-backed posture of someone who had spent decades in uniform. "Grandpa," Emma called, abandoning her snowman construction to rush toward him. The older man's stern expression immediately softened as he knelt to embrace his granddaughter, checking her over with barely disguised concern, despite Kate's assurances over the satellite phone that Emma was unharmed. "There's my brave explorer," James said, his voice gruff yet gentle. "You had quite an adventure, didn't you? We crashed in the snow and Ranger found Mr. Marcus, and then we played in the biggest snow ever and rode a snowmobile," Emma recounted, in a single enthusiastic breath. "And Ranger was a hero, Grandpa, the biggest hero ever." At the mention of his name, Ranger approached with dignified restraint, his injury evident in his gait, but his bearing nonetheless regal. James extended his hand, allowing the German shepherd to sniff his knuckles before offering a respectful pat to the dog's head. "Good work, soldier," he acknowledged, addressing Ranger with the same seriousness he might use with a human service member. The German shepherd accepted the commendation with a slight tilt of his head, then returned to his position near Kate. James straightened, turning his attention to his daughter. The embrace they shared communicated volumes. Relief, love, and the unique understanding between those who have both served. No excessive words or dramatic displays, simply the profound connection of family members who recognize the fragility of life and the preciousness of each return. "You look good for someone who spent the night in a wrecked vehicle," James observed as they separated, his assessment both paternal and professional. "I had excellent care," Kate replied, turning toward Marcus, who had maintained a respectful distance during the family reunion. "Dad, this is Marcus Brenner, former Army Ranger. He's the reason we're all standing here." Marcus stepped forward, extending his hand. "Sir," James Sullivan's grip was firm, his gaze direct and evaluating as they shook hands. "Army Rangers," he noted, recognition evident in his tone. "First Battalion?" "Second," Marcus replied, 2011 through 2016. James nodded, a wealth of understanding in the simple gesture. "Marine Corps, Force Recon, Vietnam through Desert Storm." He released Marcus's hand, but maintained eye contact. "My daughter says you ventured into a blizzard to rescue them on the word of a German shepherd. That takes a particular kind of courage, or foolishness." The assessment contained no judgment, merely the frank evaluation of someone who understood calculated risk. Marcus recognized the comment as both question and compliment. Ranger made a compelling case, he responded evenly, and your daughter and granddaughter handled themselves with exceptional composure throughout the situation. Emma's quite remarkable. James's expression warmed slightly. Takes after her mother. His gaze shifted to the snowmobile and sled. Impressive setup you've developed. Long-range patrol experience showing through in the modifications. The observation confirmed Marcus's earlier impression of James Sullivan as someone who recognized the technical details others might miss. Adaptability remains essential in these conditions, Marcus acknowledged. Indeed it does, James agreed, his tone suggesting the comment applied to more than just equipment. He turned back toward the truck, gesturing for Emma to join him. Let's get your things loaded, young lady. Your mother and I need to discuss recovery options for the Subaru. As James helped Emma into the truck's back seat, properly securing her in a booster seat with Ranger settling beside her, Kate approached Marcus. The privacy of the moment created a different quality to their interaction, something more personal than their previous communications, despite its brevity. My father doesn't impress easily, she said, nodding toward the older man. Military recognition aside, the fact that he's not interrogating you about every detail of our rescue speaks volumes. Marcus smiled slightly. High praise from Force. Recon? The highest, Kate confirmed. She hesitated, uncharacteristic uncertainty briefly visible in her expression. About what Emma said earlier, visiting us in Bozeman, that wasn't just a child's idle comment. The directness of her statement caught Marcus slightly off guard, though he had been considering the same subject throughout their journey to the junction. Before he could formulate a response, Kate continued. No pressure or expectations, she clarified, but the invitation is genuine, from both of us. The simple acknowledgement that the connection they had formed during this brief, intense period held value worth preserving resonated deeply with Marcus. For years, he had avoided precisely these types of personal bridges, finding safety in isolation, but increasingly recognizing its limitations. I'd like that, he replied, the words coming more easily than he had anticipated. Once your vehicle situation is sorted and things have settled. Kate reached into her coat pocket, extracting a small notebook and pen. She wrote quickly, tore the page out, and offered it to Marcus. My contact information. Cell reception is better in Bozeman than out here in the wilderness, but sometimes even there it gets spotty. The landline is the most reliable. Marcus accepted the paper, tucking it carefully into his own pocket. The exchange felt significant, a tangible commitment to continued connection, rather than allowing their paths to diverge permanently after this chance intersection. James Sullivan approached, having secured Emma and Ranger in the truck. About the Subaru, he began, addressing both Kate and Marcus with the straightforward manner of someone accustomed to tactical planning. I've contacted Peterson's recovery service in Pine Ridge. They specialize in difficult extractions, but with the vehicle's location and condition. Total loss, Kate confirmed. The insurance will cover it. More importantly, we all walked away. James nodded, acknowledging both the practical assessment and the deeper gratitude beneath it. They'll attempt recovery once road conditions permit, likely within the next 48 hours. He turned to Marcus. Your assistance in providing precise coordinates was invaluable. Least I could do, Marcus replied. A moment of silence followed, not awkward but transitional, the natural pause before departure. Emma solved the momentary uncertainty by rolling down the truck's window despite the cold air. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.